All right, and the winner for Best Picture for 2019 is La La Land. Oh, wait, sorry. No. My mistake. It's Parasite. Parasite won. Parasite is the Best Picture winner. This is not a joke.
All right.
Yes, folks, it may be hard to believe that a non-English language film has, for the first time in the history of the Academy, won Best Picture. Certainly less believable than La La Land, but it is in fact the case. Something that has sparked mass controversy from racist white people all over the world. But what does the film really mean? And does it really talk about class as intently as it thinks it does? We're here to find out. I'm Andrew.
I'm Einish.
I'm Oleg.
And I'm Alex.
There was a nice wait
what?
right there.
That was
That was a nice pause.
I was going to try and do it as a joke, but then I decided not to afterwards, and it didn't work well.
All right, so who wants to give us a quick summary of Parasite?
I don't think I can.
Sounds like Einish really wants to.
Yeah, I think we should.
Yeah,
leave
you
it
guys
to Irish.
ripped mine to shreds last time. for good reason. Honestly,
Because it
Andrew
was
seems the most
jarbled
passionate
mess.
out of all of us for this movie, so...
Yeah, I adore this film.
Oh, you like it?
No, I mean, it's fine. I'm not huge on it, you know.
I sense beef.
Yeah, I only saw it twice in theaters. Willingly.
Oh, that's what I did for Hellboy, too.
I love that you specify willingly.
Yeah.
3 more times
Both
unwillingly.
times I actually, I've definitely, I saw Valerian twice in theaters, and I don't think I actually wanted to either time, so.
I also don't
got
think
a
that you
fidget
did.
spinner.
Okay. I can do a bit of a recap if you like.
Go for it.
Cool. So, Parasite, this is the...
Oh, yeah. I just forgot. We should say spoilers, because, we're gonna...
Okay, yeah.
When the message comes up, we're gonna go into spoilers, so...
Okay,
Yeah.
so this
Spoilers.
is spoiler alert territory. Spoiler territory.
Aren't our podcasts always spoiler, like...
They are, but I guess just specifically for Parasite, I think
Yeah,
we should
dude, our
Alright.
other
specify.
movies didn't matter.
Beware, audience. This podcast is just as spoiler heavy as every other podcast that we make.
I mean, I wouldn't care about spoilers for the sequel trilogy, so...
Yeah, I was gonna say, people can spoil Rise of Skywalker all I fucking want.
You know who spoiled Rise of Skywalker? Disney.
Yeah, I was gonna
True.
say.
Very true.
That's true.
It comes
There's only one
pre-spoiled.
person who spoiled that movie, and it was the fucking studio and Kathleen Kennedy.
All right,
Okay.
Andrew, your cue.
Parasite is the latest film from South Korean master Bong Joon-ho. This one is a bit different from the recent sci-fi fare that he's been making. It is a dark satire slash drama slash horror slash thriller slash whatever other genre it could possibly try and be. It follows the very impoverished Kim family who slowly but surely find a way to work their way into becoming house workers for a very wealthy family. Eventually, things begin to go a bit downhill one night after they stay at the house alone while the rich family is away, and they find some rather interesting secrets in the basement, which they are now forced to keep at any expense. The film ends in an explosive confrontation between the rich and the poor against the poor. And the whole thing is just pretty insane. All right, let's get into it.
So, what are y'all's thoughts on the movie? So, let's just give it real quick. Do we like it or not?
Do you actually
So-
dislike it, though?
I don't dislike it. I just think it's very hyped up for something that isn't actually very good. Like, I mean, it's
Oh,
it's
you're right.
well
It's a
done.
bit too popular. It's a bit too popular for Alex.
It's well done, I think. Yeah, I'm trying to think of how to say it. But it's well, I guess really I just don't think it says anything at all, which is really the cautious thing, or not cautious. It's the difficult thing about it, that it's a movie that it pretends like it's saying a huge amount of stuff without saying anything at all, and just because of that, it's really hurt, I think. So that's my take on it.
All right, it is noon, and I will actually it's 1 p.m. and I will hold back from making any satirical remarks about that because my sense of humor is too sober currently. However, I will say that
don't even know what you would say.
However, I do want to point out that I personally slightly disagree with you. I do think that this movie is really good, and I am pretty sure it has stuff to say. I just don't think it's as simple and as straightforward as most people I talked about this movie with think. And I think that from a technical standpoint and from a standpoint of filmmaking, this is actually a masterpiece. When it comes to what it meant, well, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
All right. Well, for me, I really love this movie. I think it is a masterpiece. There are like a few issues I kind of have, I think, but like it's so minute that it really doesn't affect the movie as a whole. I think it's expertly crafted, just very well made. Production wise, there's not a problem at all. It's just fantastic all around. And I think the message, a lot of people kind of have been grabbing the wrong message from it, or like, I don't know, like I just feel like a lot of people, it's like the same case with like other movies where like everyone is like, oh no, like sometimes people grab the wrong message from a movie, or like they may not understand the message, so they make one up sort of a thing. But I think the message is pretty clear, and I think it gets it across very well, and it's a timely message for like the world as it is nowadays. So yeah, I love it. It's one of the best films of the 2010s.
Okay, and last but not least, we get to me, who kind of shares actually a bit of all of those opinions, but maybe more exaggerated. I definitely agree with Oleg that it is a message that's a lot more complicated than most people think it is. I just think there's a lot going on in terms of the way it's delivering the message in a way that's not very straightforward and not very easy to decipher. Which personally I find to be a good thing. I agree with Einish. This is easily one of the best films of the 2010s, no doubt about it. I think that it's very rare to see a film that genuinely challenges the way you view cinema in any regard, and I think Parasite really, what it succeeds in is the way that it challenges the idea that movies have to be one genre, maybe two, maybe three, but it can't be like more than three genres at one time. And what Parasite does is it's basically at least 5 genres all at once, and it doesn't feel unnatural. It doesn't really feel like a hard shift. There's one point around the middle where it goes from comedy to more horror, where you can really kind of feel it, but beyond that, it bounces around between heist style and comedy and dark drama and psychological thriller in a way that you wouldn't really tell the difference unless you were really tuned into it. So yeah, I think it's a masterful film, and I think it has a lot to say, and I don't think it really says it in a way that's super easy to figure out either.
All right, now that we are all done with our intro statements, as we call them on this channel, who wants to try to shoot at what the message of the movie is?
The question is, who's the parasite?
Venom.
Yeah, Venom, that's
Got
it.
a song field.
We're losers, Eddie.
Wheeled. All right.
I will say, actually, I think that question of who is the parasite is actually a very important one. And I also, at least personally, I don't think it's as simple as just saying it's the rich or the poor, because personally, I think it's a bit of both.
I agree with that a lot.
Yeah, because I think like the Kim family definitely. What's the name of the rich family? I cannot remember.
Whatever, the rich
The
family.
Park family.
The
Park
Gates.
family. The Park family are the rich family. The Kim family is the poor family. Just for clarification. So yeah, the Kim family definitely preys on the Parks, using their house when they're not home, taking in vast sums of money from them, even going so far as to frame the maid as possibly spreading diseases through the house in one of the funniest scenes in the film. But then also that kind of gets flipped on its head almost immediately, because while the Kims are preying on the Park family at their house, like using their house without their permission, they find a guy in the basement who's also poor, who is literally like powering the house for the rich people, and they don't even realize he's there.
Well, I feel like it's pretty clear that it's the poor family that's preying on the older family, or on the rich family.
I disagree.
Yeah, I
Really?
also disagree with that.
Really, you don't think that it's really obvious that they're just taking advantage of them, and like they're
Well, I mean,
literally
it's
absorbing
obvious-
all their resources and stuff.
It's obvious
That
that they're
part's
taking
obvious.
advantage of them, but the thing is, I don't think that parasitic Badamt's relationship is flowing one way, because when you like the movie makes a point to address the fact that the poor family, I think it's the Han family,
The Kim family is the
sorry,
poor
the Kim
Park
family,
is
yeah,
the rich
that
family.
was horrible on my part. I'm bad with names.
That's okay. I also kind of I also kind of forgot the names. I know the actors' names, but I don't know the character names.
Yeah, the thing is,
Also, none of them were nominated for actor or actress roles. Which
that
I
is
think
that is unfair, actually.
That's
really
stupid.
unfair.
Dude.
But we're getting there.
So,
Okay, so I think that the thing about this is, as I was saying, is that that relationship does not flow one way, because like that scene where the poor family, the Kim family, is like trapped under the sofa, and the two rich people are like talking to each other, and it's uncovered that they're also like fucked up, hypocritical, horrible people, and like how the family, and at another scene, how the family is literally like swimming through like feces and sewer water and rainwater because their house is over flooding, while the other family is like looking at all of this happening. While I will say that the Park family do not actively like try to use the Kim family's resources, the only reason for that is because the Kim family has like no resources to be stolen in the first place. Like both families are shown from a negative perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Also,
think I don't
about
think
the wealthy-
the wealthy family is that bad. Like if you look at them, they're a bit dickish at times, but there's nothing like evil about them.
Well, yeah, they're just shown to be very dickish, very hypocritical. They're
they're not
shown.
shown as being like evil though. Yeah, like that's what kind of I think makes them more.
Well, nobody in the
complex.
movie is per se shown
Well,
to be evil.
They're
That's the
not
thing.
shown to be evil, but the poor family is certainly shown to be capable of more vile deeds.
Most certainly. Most certainly.
I think the wealthy are like just as parasitic, I guess, as the or not just as, but they are also like parasitic in the same way that the rich, like I think the rich family is also parasitic. Basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Like, what
because
do
I
they
realized
have to be parasitic about? Like, there's nothing
what I
to
realize
take
is
from
that
the poor.
they need the poor. Like Andrew explained, like the whole thing about like how he's powering the thing, but also like they need tutors, they need maids, they need like all these people, because they like throughout the film say like, yeah, we can't do it on our own. Like my wife cannot cook. My husband for some reason can't drive himself to work. He needs a driver. My son needs an art tutor. So like they like require the poor people and like the poor family, the Kims, to like basically just like survive in everyday life.
That's a good point, actually, I will say.
Yeah, the one thing that really struck me seeing it the second time was, and I don't know why it didn't ring out the first time, but the fact that the guy, even in the basement, even with his hands tied, is using his head and smashing his head against the wall to turn on the lights as Mr. Park comes up the stairs. and the guy doesn't even know he's there. And I think that was what I found interesting, is that while the Kim family is very actively parasitic in the sense that like they're actively taking advantage of the rich family is parasitically taking advantage of the poor, but they don't even realize they're doing it. And I think to me that was kind of one of the big parts of the message that I got, was that the poor have to actively prey on the rich people. The rich people just prey on the poor naturally, and they don't even realize they're doing it.
I also love how like the fighting, it's very obvious in the second act where like the two poor families, like the old maid and her husband, they're fighting with the Kim family, and it's like the poor are just fighting with the poor to like kind of like gain the upper hand, and like, you know, because they kind of need the rich to survive, sort of a thing.
It seems
and how like it's because of the system in place that they have to, like, they think that they have to do this.
I was going to say the difference though is that the poor family are like very intentionally doing stuff. They're very intentionally going out of their way to do vile deeds. They're actively attacking each other, you know, all this stuff. And then on the other hand, you have the rich family who, like you said, they are somewhat reliant on the poor, but they're not actively, intentionally trying to do anything.
I think
That's
you're
kind of
looking
one-
at it
that's
from the wrong, okay, not gonna say wrong perspective, but like the perspective from which I think Einish and Andrew have been like looking at the movie is more like, while the poor have to struggle to survive in the system, the rich are still using like the poor, and they wouldn't be able to survive without them, and they don't even acknowledge that. Like, their position was comfortable enough so that they don't even like realize that fighting is going on in the first place. To them, it's
and
just...
this is a bit more
given.
like not specific to the movie, but if you kind of think of like, for example, like say a factory, you know, like especially in the days before like automated machinery, like no factory could have possibly operated without all the workers who are putting their life at risk for minimum wage. How often do you think the guy who has a corporate office in a city 100 miles away from the main factory ever thought about like the workers and the fact that like without the workers he couldn't put the whole factory up? He was worried about the finances,
often.
he was worried about the checkbooks, he was worried about the accountants. He
I
never
think
really
very,
thought too much about the
very
workers.
often. My whole family comes from the fucking whatchamacallit, assembly line and stuff. So
Yeah, so does my family too. I'd just like to throw that out there.
I've had one of my family, I think, became a foreman too at some point. But essentially, all those foreman people come from the floor. That's kind of the point, is that they come from the floor, and they usually, hopefully, they know how to manage the floor.
But not all of them make it. It's only like a few of them. You can't have every floorman become a manager.
I feel like this is
and
turning
again,
into
yeah,
a
obviously, I'm
political
not
trying to
discussion and not a
generalize or
discussion
anything like
about
that.
Parasite.
Well, fair, but
yeah, sorry, I'm not.
I was gonna say
I'm not trying to make like a huge political statement against the factory system, and I'm not trying to generalize. I was just trying to put like in perspective, like sort of like maybe like a real world example where this kind of idea could maybe be placed. If you get what I mean, like I'm not trying to make a big statement. It's just kind of
right.
like,
Well, yeah, I was gonna say,
I
I think discussion on the movie very quickly shifts into a discussion on basically economics. Very very quickly, quickly becomes a discussion on the merits of like capitalism and communism and whatnot.
I think that it's fair to discuss like politics in terms of the movie, because the movie is most certainly political, however you look at it. However, like if it turns just into an argument of like is capitalism bad, is communism bad, when it's not even related back to the movie, then I feel like we should just cut it off and go back to the
Well,
movie.
yeah, but I think
Yeah, I'm not making either of those.
yeah,
points, by
no,
the way,
I don't
and
think
plan
either of
to.
us are really, but I'm more. I guess really any point you make about the movie also sounds like a political statement. Like
Yeah, it's true.
when you're talking about.
I mean, you
the-
can just
the
talk
message
about
of
like the
film.
filmmaking, which is
Well,
fantastic.
yeah,
I mean,
but
you could
we're-
think that the
we're
message is X
specifically-
and disagree with it.
I was gonna say
So not really.
we're specifically talking about the message here, Einish. So you can't just say the filmmaking is good and say, well, yeah, but because I mean it is
We all
good,
know it is.
but more to the point, like especially when you're talking about like, well, who is leeching off of who is in the right, who is in the wrong, all that stuff, kind of like the poor did nothing wrong, or the
Well, no, I agree with you, but the thing is, you can say, I think the movie argues for that point for certain reasons, but that doesn't mean you have to agree with it. Like, it never has to actually turn into a political debate.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
more
I don't think
more.
I agree politically with everything that I feel like the film's trying to say, but like,
Oh, I disagree with
I
a great
definitely
deal
like
of it. But
respect. I respect every point that it brings up. I will say that for sure. I respect
It
the
also-
fact that it brings it up.
It's like a different culture, I think. Also, like I personally don't know the Japanese. Not wow. I
Korean.
don't know the Korean.
you
That was
racist.
bad. I don't know.
bastard.
Like, I've been watching a lot of anime recently. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know like the Korean government that well, but maybe that's how it is over there. But I think there's still like, you can still take parts of it for like it's like parts of it are like universal.
Yeah,
So
I
let
will...
me-
Oh, sorry.
Let me. I'm looking something up, but you guys keep going. But there's an interesting point that Bong made that I'm gonna try and find.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a shot at talking about politics without talking about politics. I think that Parasite is not necessarily a full-on left-wing movie like a lot of people consider it to be, because most people, like especially like I and we all live in a college town in the United States.
Very left-wing college.
So yeah, like a lot of people around here love Parasite mostly because they perceive it as to be some sort of like a new communist manifesto, or just like a big statement for anarchy or something. And I don't quite think that it is, because the thing is, the house in the movie is most likely a symbolism for like wealth, status, whatever you want to define it as. It's the symbolism of that. And the moment like trouble starts is the moment the poor people actually try to get into that house. So while I still think that Bong Joon-ho is probably coming from like a somewhat left-leaning perspective, for sure, like he sympathizes with the poor family and kind of presents a grotesque image of the rich family. I personally know somebody who I recommended to watch the movie, and after having watched it, they thought it was a movie that was actually like speaking out against social progress and saying that trouble only starts when things change, and like the only way to keep everyone safe is to preserve the social order that already exists, because like everybody's already at their place. And the thing is, I don't think that's what the movie was going for, but there are a lot of aspects to this film that actually correspond with that rhetoric. Like the poor people are awful. Like they just
Yeah.
are. And
They
usually
honestly
sorry,
do
I'm
worse
just like a
things.
few more sentences, and then I'm gonna
No,
give it up.
yeah, sorry.
Because like normally in a left wing point of view, a left wing story, so to speak, you would expect the poor people to be virtuous because they are not spoiled by wealth, and you would expect the rich people to be like the assholes, the bad people. But here, like everybody's just bad, and the bad shit starts happening when like poor people actually start doing shit. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Well, that is kind of also part. I think we have actually talked about this a little bit before, Oleg. We have kind of a similar issue here, where that's kind of part of the issue, is that I generally, when you're making a movie, like ambiguity is good and all, but especially I think when you're making something that's supposed to be a political message, which I think this very clearly is, you generally want that political message to be clear, or at least clear enough that you can tell that there's not like totally backwards views on it and stuff, like as much as you can avoid it because people are idiots. But if nobody can understand what you're trying to say, then you fucked up somewhere. It's a persuasive argument, every piece of art. So if you can't even communicate properly what you're trying to persuade them to think, then you failed.
I have something I'd like to say on that point, which is that I don't think every film that I think there's this idea that if you bring up a problem, you need to bring up a solution in artwork, and personally, I don't think that should be necessary or is exactly true.
Well,
because
that's not the point I was making. That
no.
You don't need to.
I mean, yeah. So like for Parasite, like there's a message to Parasite for sure about the class system and like the rich and the poor and the divide between that. But that is such a complicated issue that no one could possibly have only one thing to say about it. There's no like one universal message that everyone can agree upon. So you can't really have just one thing to say.
Well, right.
And
it's
so
not saying one thing.
I respect Bong for having what I perceive as the intellect and self-knowledge to know that he cannot he cannot bring one message to an issue that's far more complex than he could ever know the answer to. I think that's just smarts on behalf of him as a filmmaker.
I think it's a bit more... sorry.
I was going to say, I'm not arguing that he's saying, or that, he needs to say one thing. I'm arguing that he has to say even a single thing clearly. So he really... What is he trying to say about the class system? As far as I can tell, the only thing that he says clearly is that there is a class system. That's about it. Besides that,
I think
maybe that
what he's
everyone
trying to
is
say
a
is that like
fuckhead.
the class system is problematic, and there's like obviously it's hurting. Like in a parasitic relationship, someone is always getting hurt. In this case, both
that's the
sides
definition
are
of
hurting
parasite.
each other. But yeah, both sides are hurting each other, and it's because of this class system that's in place, and it needs to change, but there's no easy solution, and he doesn't know the solution, but he is trying to bring to light that this has to change. So I also kind of appreciate a film that, like, one example that comes to mind is there's this really great documentary called High School, where they show very, like, how, like, the relationship between student, teacher, and like the school in general, like there's something wrong there, and you can pinpoint aspects of it that are wrong, but you can't really tell exactly what is wrong in general. But it's like just the school system is flawed, and they don't know how to fix it, but they never really like it's that sort of like showing, but not like having a clear message because it's such a complex issue. I think that's kind of powerful in a way where it's like, yeah, no, like if you bring up like a solution, I feel like it wouldn't it can't be like there's no one easy solution, but just bringing to light that it is a problem that has to be fixed, it's more powerful, I guess. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, well, it's there's a thin line between bringing up a problem and not giving a solution, and the idea of what even is the problem that he's bringing up. He's just saying, well, there's a problem here, and that isn't helpful to anybody really at all. It's not helpful to anybody trying to come up with the solution.
I would disagree with that slightly, but I'll let you finish your point.
Well, I mean, who does it help to say, well, there is an issue? Because everybody knows there is. okay, perhaps not everybody, because again, there are idiots in the world. But we all are aware that there are class disparities. Like that is something everyone it gets made aware of at some point in their life. But what is he trying to even say is really the issue? If anybody has thoughts,
I mean, I'm holding off on a different point. I was thinking it was more of a discussion between Andrew and you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I guess that means I'm up.
Yeah.
Yay,
Answer?
here we go. Yeah. I will say, like, I'm not going to pretend that I know what this movie is trying to say. I don't. I've thought about it a lot, and it's really hard to pinpoint. Personally, I think that's a great value. I think if a message is clear, it doesn't stick with you at all after the movie's over. If you see a movie and you know exactly what it's about by the time it ends, you have no reason to take it out of the theater with you. If you see a movie and it's a bit cryptic, that means you have to leave the theater and think about it. And that makes it stick on your mind a lot longer. It makes the movie a lot more impactful. And also, when you finally figure something out, you feel like you figured it out. And so the message means that much more to you because it's personal. So I think that's a great advantage that Parasite has. I mean, I guess as far as the class disparities issues goes, we already talked about the fact that it's kind of like parasitic both ways. But I also, I think a big part of the message is, well, one, besides the parasiticness, the fact that it's the poor fighting amongst the poor to gain the value that the rich has, which means that they're both attacking each other, which isn't actually the problem. And that's shown. I think that is one thing that's shown very clearly, is that if the poor keep fighting amongst the poor, the wealthy are just going to keep sitting up there and watching them duke it out, and they're not going to be affected by it. So I think that's one thing that kind of shows, especially in that final ending confrontation. The character played by Song Kang-ho, Mr. Kim, he's the only person who actually figures out that when the poor are attacking each other, he's the only one who attacks a rich person because he's the only one who gets it. And even so, he still gets stuck as a servant to the rich people going forward. And also, I couldn't find it. I wanted to find it, but Bong Joon-ho actually did the math on how long it would take the son to be able to purchase the house on the current money that he was making at the job he had at the end of the movie. And it was over 100 years if he didn't spend any of the money he made and saved every single cent, is how long it would take him to actually have bought that house, which is that's a huge disparity. And I think that's another thing that Parasite is trying to point out too, is that everyone knows there's class disparity. Most people are willfully ignorant of how large it actually is. I think that was one thing Parasite was trying to draw attention to as well, is it's here, but it's way worse than you think. And also, it's way harder to find a solution than you think it is.
Can I butt in?
Yeah.
No.
Absolutely not.
Well, I don't give a shit. Andrew said yes.
Fuck off.
Yeah, I do want to say that I'm not sure that, the message that poor people need to stop fighting each other and fight against the rich is something that the movie really goes into. Because, the poor people, the only reason they start fighting each other in the first place is because they want the house, pretty much. And, it seems like the parallel is pretty clear with house being status and wealth. They're fighting each other and not the rich. But the movie never presents, there is never an idea brought up that, somehow they can just take it from the rich. There's never an idea that they even could unite. The poor people, while their poverty is presented in both cases, they're not, through methods of storytelling, ever presented as a single class. There is nothing really uniting them. There is no common goal between them. The idea that, they're both poor and they could unite to potentially overthrow the rich, or if we go further into the anarchy or the communism idea, like, is never actually stated in the movie. That's something that people who watch the movie, like, infer for themselves, because most of the people who I talk with the movie about are lefties, and that's what they want to infer from the movie.
Yeah, I can see that. Although I will say, I think there is definitely some way in which those two classes, if those two poor families weren't supposed to be seen as on equal footing, then why would they switch places at the end of the movie?
They didn't really switch places. Like, the father found himself locked in the basement, but, like, the other family, like, they didn't really switch places. The other family was just out of the picture.
I guess so, yeah. But I feel like it seems almost, even when watching the film, it seems almost illogical that the father would like openly try and let the people in the basement die and then become the person in the basement. I feel like there was definitely something trying to be said there, or else they would have just had the father leave with the rest of the family. Like, he put himself by fighting the other people who are living in that situation, by fighting the other poor, he just took their place while the rich continued to be fine.
I will, like, give you credit here. I think that interpretation of the movie is perfectly valid. Like, I can totally see your reasoning from the movie to think that is actually what the movie is trying to say. But my thing about the movie is, like Parasite, is that whatever message you take out of it, you have to, like, infer something on your own and throw in your personal experience, particularly your political opinion in general, to, like, come to any sort of conclusion. Like, for example, we all here, as young people, and especially as college students living in a very leftist town, we come, like, in contact, even if we don't support it, and it's okay either way. We very often come in contact with, like, leftist ideas, and I don't think it's unreasonable for us to then, like, perceive the movie through those ideas we hear a lot, because we see that correlation. But like, at the same time, that one friend that I brought up, it's a friend from Russia. Once again, like, I'm not gonna be revealing any actual identities. Like,
What's their social security?
coming from a
Okay,
more
number, please.
traditionalist, like, outlook, they, like, inferred that the movie was actually, like, protecting the status quo and just an extremely conservative film. And, like, I don't think either of those really answer the question, because why I think this movie really is this interesting and this spectacular is because it just takes, like, two phrases were said today in the podcast. Andrew said that if you suggest a problem, you don't have to suggest a solution. And Alex says the only thing the movie states is that there is a class system. And I think that really is what's going on. The movie is just saying, like, yes, there is a class system, and takes that class system, that very basic, really unanimous, like, definition of the class system, infers it into a metaphor, and then plays out a story, kind of like an exploration of a butterfly effect, when, like, poor and rich come in conflict with each other and, like, in their own groups because of this status, and then lets us as viewers, as the audience, infer our own political biases onto that story. And that is very captivating and interesting to me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know if
Yeah, I agree
there's
with that.
something else to add, but yeah, that's great. Anything else of great interest from the film that someone wants to talk about?
I mean, if we're talking about the writing and not, like, the technical aspects, I'm not going to praise them, but I will say that... Sorry, my voice is... Something's going on here. But yeah, I will say that I still think that there are some issues on the level of storytelling, because once again, as definitely a child of Western storytelling, like, I was consuming Western storytelling when I was a kid, and it kind of formed my opinions on stuff. So I think that this movie, for me personally, was very inefficient in its storytelling, because it really just took me a lot of time and, like, mental gymnastics to explain what it was trying to do. Like, I feel like that while the movie doesn't have to be clear, like even the exploration of the political messages that should be obvious like took me a lot of time, like a lot of like, okay, so what does this correspond to, what does this correspond to? I feel like that maybe is why a lot of people are confused with a message, is because the way it presents the message is in general confusing.
It also kind of is like a not a difficult message, but it is like the kind of movie that like you kind of just have to like sit on and kind of marinate for a bit, which I do like, because I don't see a lot of movies where I come out of the theaters and I'm still thinking about it like months later. I can count on like one hand how many films that happened to me like this year, last year, with so.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
The movie didn't leave me with a spectacular impression. To me, it was like, you went through it and you were like, okay, I guess it's trying to say something here. And that was kind of it. You just kind of leave off there with, well, it was trying to say something. Don't know quite what it was saying. You can try and extend it into saying whatever the hell you want, but it's well made, but it's not so spectacularly well made that it's like it's not a lighthouse, right? It's not like the cinematography is going to stun you and amaze you into silence and like.
As the Lighthouse lover of this podcast, I will actually slightly disagree with you. I think the cinematography in Parasite is absolutely stunning. Like the editing is one of the best I have like ever seen in movies in general.
I think the lighting is also just very like I don't see movies that often where I'm like, wow, the lighting was very good, but the lighting was fantastic throughout the film, and I think like it also reflects sort of the emotion that the scene was going for. Everything technically, I think, is just fantastic.
I think the
shots.
Comedy is very good in this, but I don't think it's. I don't think from like a cinematography standpoint, it's like some stunning thing, right? You're not like, it's not something that I would study and be like, how the hell did they capture it? No, it's like, okay, it shot well. Like it shot better certainly than most of the stuff that people put out nowadays, but that's more of a statement on current day cinema than it is on Parasite.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of shots throughout. Oh, go ahead, Andrew.
I will throw in that like I agree. I think the cinematography in The Lighthouse is better than it is in Parasite, but I also think that The Lighthouse is more focused on visual storytelling and dialogue storytelling, where I think Parasite is more focused on telling a story through every facet of cinema. And that's one thing that makes cinema so different from every other art form, is you don't have to listen. It's not music where there's only a certain number of instruments, or poetry where it's just the words on the paper. Same with like all literature, or even a play where it's just the stage and the actors and the writing. There are a ridiculous amount of moving pieces in a film, and the greatness of a film doesn't so much come from one aspect being amazing, but from every aspect being very good, and them all working together in a cohesive whole. And the reason I found Parasite to be so amazing is not only does everything work together as a cohesive whole, but I think the film really pushes itself and challenges itself to be a lot of different things all at one time, and it still manages to be that cohesive whole. So while like the cinematography, for example, very, very good, not The Lighthouse, but that's not the only thing there. There's so much more to it, and everything else works in conjunction with the cinematography so well. I think you kind of have to look at it all together.
I also want to say that like the editing and the pacing, I just looked up the length of the movie, and it's 132 minutes long, and it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, no, the
Which is
editing in the
actually
movie
remarkable.
is masterful. Like if we go back to the scene with the peach, where they're like trying to showcase that the maid is like infectious, that scene is phenomenally edited.
That
like
whole
with the
montage,
music,
that
is
that
so
section
good.
specifically, I do like. I will say I think the comedy is super well executed in this. Probably better. I like it better than I like most of the drama in it. Sorry. But well, and I don't think I suffer from quite the same thing as Oleg was saying with the he was saying like he was raised in a Western setting, and so he doesn't quite have the same tool or the right tools to dissect this very kind of Eastern storytelling style. And while yes, I was obviously...
Quick call out before I let you continue your point. That's not exactly what I said. I said I can't evaluate whether or not it was effective. I'm not saying it's effective, but I didn't get it.
Fair point. Or fair point of clarification, rather. More what I'm trying to say is that, yes, I was raised in, obviously, the West, but I have consumed pretty large amounts of Eastern content, specifically Japanese, and actually a bit of Korean, too. I think, did Bong Joon-ho also do Old Boy, or who is that?
That was
No,
Park
that's,
Chan-wook.
Park Chan-wook.
The only other movie by Bong Joon-ho that I've seen is Snowpiercer.
No, that was Spike Lee who did Old Boy.
Yeah.
Fuck off.
Spike Lee, Old Boy, yeah.
I actually am not the biggest fan of Snowpiercer.
I didn't like Snowpiercer.
I have not seen that.
I haven't. I've seen The Host and Okja though, and I thought The Host was fantastic.
I still that's on my watch list. But I think I have a fair amount to go based off of for when it comes to like Eastern style storytelling. Enough that I'm not thrown off by it anymore at all, really. So I don't think that's really my issue. I think my issue is that it's just completely unclear what it's trying to say. In that, because of that, it's used as just like a fill in the gap for whatever the hell you want it to say. And I think that's a terrible thing in art. That's a terrible, terrible thing to be. Is to be just like someone's go-to, well, it's obviously trying to say this. Because, well, one, it's kind of... It becomes almost propaganda-ish. When you can make something say whatever you want it to say, it's saying nothing. And if it's saying nothing, like the whole point of art is to say something. That's kind of an inexorable part of art, is that it's supposed to have meaning, right? In that's what separates us from kind of beasts. To take a big grand philosophical stand, but it's because we have reason and the ability to create art, which carries meaning inherently in it. And so if you're making art that means nothing, then it's worth nothing as well.
Well, I will say that like music doesn't necessarily have to mean something. Sometimes it just makes you feel a certain way.
Well, that's why, like,
if we think back to like the modernist, like honestly postmodernist, like paintings, like or honestly even better surrealist paintings, then like very often they're just like squares or shapes or colors on a canvas. And while I personally, I will admit, am not the biggest fan of that style of art, you can't just like invalidate it by saying like, oh, that's not art.
Well, that's not what I'm saying either. What I'm saying is
well, yeah, but that has no meaning.
Well,
they don't
actually,
have a meaning.
I would argue that the meaning it has is in the meaning it has is in the way it makes you feel, right? For those things, so like the
friends we made along the way.
yeah, I know it's a little bit of a bullshit statement to say, but I think that's the honest truth. Otherwise, I wouldn't say it.
Yep. Just for a quick perspective, Surrealist was originally a movement started to imitate the unconscious via Freud and to try and imitate dreams through a visual medium.
Yeah, exactly. It's trying to explore.
They did a pretty good job at it, I'd say.
Yeah. Well, the meaning is that it's asking the question of what is lingering in the subconscious, what is lingering in the places of the mind that you can't go. And so that's kind of the meaning of it. So that surrealist stuff, and I'd argue even the abstract, even though I hate most of it, are trying to say something. Like those abstract pieces, when they're not total shit, it's supposed to be about the idea of rejection of art fundamentals, right? It's supposed to be about saying I disagree, that art has to be X thing. That's why I forget who did it, but the famous piece, the fountain, where the guy took a urinal and
I
signed
remember
it.
talking about that.
Oh yeah.
In our French class.
Yeah, well, I call it Ars Nova, like as in ARSE, because they call themselves Ars Nova as in ARS, so I make fun of them by calling them an ass. But that's besides the point. More to the point is that that has a very specific meaning. And that meaning is that it's saying fuck you to the people trying to define what art is and can be. And on the other hand, that's what makes certain pieces of abstract art really shit, is that they don't have that meaning in them. They don't have that part that has, like, it's not a rejection of something. It's just saying, well, it's all the people that look at abstract art and say, well, I could paint that. And yes, you could. But why? Why are you painting them versus why are they painted here? I think that's
So are you saying, just to clarify, are you saying
Yeah.
that abstract art is like not art if it's not trying to say something? Or are you saying that it's still art because it's more about the way it makes you feel?
I would argue that anything without meaning is inherently not art.
What if the meaning changes, as it does with Parasite? That's where I'm going with this.
So you're asking, like, what if it is multiple interpretations?
Well,
type
actually,
thing?
let me give you an example to explain what I mean, because it's not even necessarily about multiple interpretations, but you could, from a certain point of view, define it like that. Like, there is a surrealist piece by a Russian painter, Kazimir Malevich, The Black Square. It's pretty famous. Like, and the painting is just like a black square on a canvas. And
Right.
like, while a lot of critics are saying that, like, why does this deserve such praise? It's just a black square on a canvas. A lot of people still consider it art because, as many art like studies people define it as just like the embodiment of the subconscious, the dark, brooding, square nature of like your whatever limitations. Like, I'm not gonna pretend I fully understand that stuff. Like, that it's deeply psychological. But the thing is, some other people argue that actually once you look at it from the perspective of the artist who was drawing the picture in like the age that preceded the Russian Revolution, which saw the Soviet Union created, they argue that it's actually not that at all, and it's more supposed to represent the tensions of like society and class. I guess the tensions of class tensions. Yeah, beautifully worded. But and what I'm getting at here is the way you look at art is defined by the context and the perspective from which you're looking at that piece. So you infer the meaning from the like you see where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah, obviously. Yeah. The idea that time changes.
Wait, where are you going
meaning.
with this?
But
And Parasite works
go
just
ahead.
like that. It takes your political agenda and it infers it into a meaning. Because I'm sure there was a singular meaning that Bong Joon-ho wanted to focus on. Like, I'm sure
What, is
maybe
there?
like I think there was. Like,
there a
I
singular
would
meaning?
guess there was.
Yeah,
Like-
I think there was two. I don't know what it is, and I'm fully willing to admit that. And I'm not sure anyone will. I mean, like, Stanley Kubrick was infamous for making movies, and people would be like, "Do you know what it means?" And he would say, "Yeah," and then he would never tell anyone what it meant, and he died not having told anyone what it meant. Yeah, which is badass, by the way. But I agree very much with both Alex and Oleg on this. That yes, art definitely should have something to say or some meaning, but also, and if art doesn't say anything, then, like, you know, what's the point? Even if it's art just talking about art, like abstract, then at least it still, like, has something to say, even if it's not political and it's just about art in general, which is kind of political, but whatever. Art is interesting because of the fact that no two people will ever experience the same artwork the exact same way, because everyone interprets every piece of art that they see differently. And so I don't think that's necessarily a knock to Parasite, that everyone interprets it in a different way.
Well,
And also, I would like to just
That's
to
what I
point
find
out before we
fascinating about it.
before we continue, that, like, personally, I don't think the great, like, message of Parasite is in its political message. I think the great message of Parasite is in its art and in the way it blends genres, and the way that it's, and to me, the big message of Parasite, the more clear message of Parasite, is you don't have to be what you can lay out an issue like class divisions, but you don't have to do it in a comedy or a drama or a psychological thriller or a heist movie. You can do all of that at one time. The idea that you don't have to pick a specific genre to talk about a specific issue is, to me, the more overarching message of the film, and the one that rings the most true and the most obvious.
well, I would argue that I mean, if you say that he had a clear meaning or a clear intention, then we come back to kind of the original point, which is it is also a failure, like, especially for this, when there's clearly a message that's trying to be handed to the audience, right? They're clearly trying to communicate.
I don't necessarily think that, but I'll clarify when you're done.
Okay, but when there's clearly a desire to give a message and to communicate with the audience, if they just totally fail to communicate at all, if everybody walks away with a different thing and nobody understands what you're trying to say, then you failed. And this is also part of my hatred of the abstract art too, is that I think it also is very bad at saying what it wants to say, and I think it's very bad at, you know, deciding what it wants to say specifically. But it, sorry, apologies. But it's essentially like writing, especially making a narrative. This isn't some abstract art thing. This isn't a black square on a portrait that makes you ask, what is art? Can this be art too? This is a narrative. This is a narrative that is meant to deliver a message. And if you can't deliver that message, then you failed. And it doesn't matter how pretty it looks. It doesn't matter how good it sounds. It doesn't matter how well edited it is. If you fail to deliver a message because the writing is not there, it's bad. Or not bad, but I will say I cannot accept it as a great piece of art. As, you know, everybody seems to claim that it's a perfect film? I don't think so. I think it's fundamentally flawed in writing.
Okay, it's definitely not a perfect film.
I agree
Because
with that.
I don't think that, like, it's if
There's
a
no
perfect
such
thing
thing
exists,
as a perfect film.
Yeah,
I
I
would
agree with
argue.
Mine.
except for The
Perfect film
Lighthouse, of
doesn't
course,
exist.
but we're not talking about that. But
Even the line.
Yeah, I think you mean
Otherwise-
Hellboy is a perfect film, though.
yeah, Hellboy
That is
is
true.
a
Hellboy
perfectly
is-
terrible film.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's perfectly bad in every regard. That I think is possible. To be perfectly good in every regard, I think is impossible. But
Baba Yaga.
I don't think that this is a movie that, like, I think it fails to communicate a consistent message. But the thing is, like, we all watched the movie and we all got something from it.
Yeah.
It's
And
just
I
like
would,
we all got a different thing, and some of us who are luckily not present in this podcast room decided that what they inferred was the correct option, and all the other alternatives were incorrect. And I hate when people do that, but
yes.
like there are still messages that people got from the movie. Like,
I have a
Yeah.
quick point, just really, like, kind of going off what Andrew said, and then I'll shut up. But
Go ahead.
I like that when Andrew said, like, everyone kind of grabs a different thing from art. I think that's one of, like, the most important things about art is just, like, the fact that everyone pulls something different from it. And, like, when people pull something different from it, that leads to discussion, that leads to more, like, you know, exposure to the art, and then that pushes the lifespan of the art forward. And I think that's just, like, such a fundamental part of it that a lot of movies kind of miss, where it's, like, a clear-cut message or like a clear cut, like, okay, it was this, and everyone's like kind of like on a similar page. I think it's more interesting when it's like everyone has sort of like a similar-ish idea, but it's like different enough to where it's like, okay, no, this is like, this leads to more discussion, that leads to more
exactly. That's kind of part of the issue, is that there's
I think
a
that's
very
part of the
key,
strength
there's
of
a
the
very
film.
well no there's a very key phrase you said in there, a similar-ish message, right? And so what do we see from this movie but a bunch of people taking completely opposite messages out of the same film?
no, Alex, I'm gonna defend Einish here. The critical message that was said by you when you said the only thing this message communicates is there is a class system. There you go. That's the message that all the other messages, once again, shittily worded, but that's the message that all the other messages that are inferred from this movie are centered around. There is a class system, and the movie is trying very hard to say something about it. And that's where people inferments start.
I have three examples I'd like to bring up. The first thing is more of a general thing, which is that people will find whatever message they want, even if it's not there.
Fair.
If you are a diehard liberal and you watch Fox News, you will take away the one sentence that matches your political perspective, and you will claim that that is like the only thing that was said on the whole news program. People have that innate bias, and they do it all the time. It's called the confirmation bias. So there's that to keep in mind. So my first like film example I'd like to bring up is Alex. I know Alex has seen it. I know Oleg has seen it. I don't think Einish has seen it yet. But 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oof.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're not going to get into that film
you can talk about film without saying 2001: A Space Odyssey, Einish. I don't see how it's possible.
Okay, not gonna lie, easily
Yeah.
possible. I don't even like that film.
I was
Yeah,
Sorry, don't you cut out, so I
we're gonna
didn't hear.
talk. We're gonna talk about the film later, so I don't wanna get into a deep discussion of it now. But I think it's fair to say that 2001 is not at all an easy film to interpret. Is that fair to say from the people who've seen it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's very good easy to say.
Yeah, and it's my personal favorite movie of all time. So there's that too. But
Now I hate it more.
so for 2001: A Space Odyssey is very hard to interpret, but I think it's also fair to assume that Stanley Kubrick had in his mind what he thought the film meant when he made it. Because if Stanley Kubrick had thought, oh, this film will mean 500 different things, he would have had to direct the movie 500 different ways. If I think
There's
every
also a book,
filmmaker has
like-
one idea of what the film is supposed to mean, because if they don't have one idea, then they can't make the movie right, because they're going to try to make it every single way. So even if a filmmaker has a singular vision for a film, like I'm sure Bong Joon-ho did here, that doesn't necessarily mean that that one single vision, that one single interpretation is what's going to shine through. And then my second example I'd like to bring up, and it's a touchy subject, but I'm going to bring it up anyways, is Green Book. And trust me, I'm going somewhere with this. So,
It's very
Best film of the
popular in this
decade?
room.
yes, if you
Can I
take...
offer you some fried chicken?
Yeah. So, can we all agree that the message of Green Book is that racism and intolerance is bad, right? We can all agree that that's the message of the film?
Yeah.
I mean, it also says fried chicken's pretty good. So,
Okay, yeah.
I mean,
So, that's a yes from all three of you, that the message of Green Book is that racism is bad, correct?
Yes.
And we all figured that out very easily when we watched the movie.
Yep.
yeah.
How many of you think that it's more worthwhile to think about Green Book than Parasite? The message. Because in essence, the messages are the same. In essence, the messages are the same. There are disparities between different groups in the world that are unfair and should be fixed. But which film is more meaningful?
I will give it to you. This
It's
is
the
an
one that
excellent
doesn't.
point.
It's the one that doesn't spell it out so straightforwardly
Well, okay.
that you don't care to think about it when it's over.
That's
Good point.
that's more of a different thing, though. I think that's and that's kind of my problem with Spike Lee movies too. Is
Well, Spike Lee directed Green Book.
yeah, it might as well.
Spike Lee loved Green Book. Couldn't you tell by the way he tried to walk out during its Best Picture win?
Yeah, and only
Yeah, actually,
Jordan,
Black Klansman
Jordan
was
Peele
pretty
could
good.
stop it.
Well, I
Green
was
Book,
gonna say,
Green Book
I
was
think-
boring as fuck and had no real value. I mean, I don't want to speak for anyone, but that's how I took that movie, considered a hot take.
Yeah.
But
Don't talk
Black
about my
Klansmen
favorite
were
film of the
actually pretty
decade that
good.
way, Oleg.
I think he didn't like that movie mostly because he was like, wait, they're using my cinematic technique of hitting the audience over the head with everything. What? They can't do that. Only I can be perfectly blunt with everything.
Well, no, I don't think that Spike
I don't
Lee
think that's
actually
it.
uses the cinematic technique of blatant racism.
But
I
yeah,
also think Spike Lee is just a better director than.
yeah. No, but
I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah.
Despite his very blunt aspects, Spike Lee is certainly more talented than Peter Farley.
But so
Have
what,
you seen Dumb and Dumber? I love that movie, actually.
what I was going to
would.
Okay, let's
what I
go
was-
back. Yeah.
What I was going to say though is that it's that's less an issue with, I think, open to interpretation, as much as it's an issue with just persuasive. They're different issues, more right. So essentially, when you're making a movie with a message and you're trying to convince someone of something, it's a persuasive essay. And when you write a persuasive essay that hits the reader over the head with your message saying, you should believe this, then, without enough force, like if you've got the force of the government behind you, it's a little bit more 1984. How many fingers am I holding up? 4. But if you're just trying to persuade someone of something, then the trick is always the, I forget, Socratic Method? Yeah, the Socratic Method, where it's kind of asking questions that lead them to the right path. So that's more the issue with Green Book, is that it, instead of asking questions, it tries to tell you what you should think, and obviously we all reject people telling us what we should think. Versus in Parasite, like it certainly doesn't tell you what you should think, but it also doesn't ask the right questions to get you to think what it wants you to think. Because clearly, it does want you to think something.
Maybe it just wants you to think about the class system. Like, I already brought this point up
Yeah.
a few minutes ago, but like maybe that's the thing. Maybe the point is to create discussion, because it creates a metaphor that is obviously about class and creates a narrative based on that metaphor that kind of explores the social tensions between different classes in kind of a butterfly effect type of way. And then we all infer different stuff from that metaphor. So isn't that just like a good way to create discussion?
I think so.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know.
Like, I mean, we all agree that no matter what your perspective is. Like, you could be like the most diehard liberal, a communist, or like literally like, I don't know, the most radical conservative. You know that Parasite, love it or hate it, is about the class system. Nobody had a single doubt about that.
I thought it was about making, like, you know, really good ramdon. Which, that scene's incredible. I showed Andrew this one video where, like, he breaks down, like, the idea behind it and, like, how they put, like, really, really rich, like, fancy beef on, like, basically dollar store noodles.
That's
I
interesting.
just really like that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, like, I never thought about it that way, but it's like, she's like, oh yeah, we just have some leftover, like, you know, steak in the refrigerator, just throw that on top of the dollar store noodles. Whereas, like, any poor person, if they, like, got that steak, they would, like, you know, plate it up real nice. Like, it would be, like, the crux of the meal almost. But here it's like, nah, just throw it on some noodles, which, that's another aspect. But.
That's another thing I'd love to point out about Parasite, and also just in general. So there's something about South Korean audiences that they are just very, very attentive when they watch movies, and they catch
because
a
they only
lot,
get, like,
and they
5
catch a
movies a
lot
year.
of little things like that. What? Sorry.
I said maybe because they only get like 5 movies a year, and so they're like, "Oh my god!"
I'm pretty sure they watch American movies, dude.
I'm
Yeah.
joking, but
Yeah, it's just that, like, I feel like that's the kind of little detail that a lot of people actually probably, especially in South Korea, would have actually understood and would have gotten. And, like, I think Parasite is a movie that's very rich in stuff like that, which, does it add to the message or not? I'm not entirely sure. I think it does. But it's worth pointing out that a movie is willing to throw in little things that a lot of people wouldn't notice, specifically because Bong Joon-ho knows that the people who see his movies in South Korea will pick up on those things, which is just brilliant, subtle filmmaking on his part.
yeah, I do like that. I do like I'm a big fan of when writers put in subtle things and then come back to them and be like, see, I hinted at it. It was there all along. But
Yeah, there's no better way to make a thing not subtle than to go back to it and be like, see, I hinted at it.
yeah, yeah, maybe not quite go see as much as yeah, but sorry.
But yeah, I do like. I think this is an excellent point, and I think definitely kudos to Bong Joon-ho for making what I consider to be a masterpiece. But I do kind of want to go back to my point very subtly for a second, because I feel like we were about
Nice
to
hit.
reach a consensus there.
Also,
Like-
it's like, we got like 40 more minutes. So
Yeah, okay.
it's-
Like, I feel like we were about to reach a consensus that, like, this movie, no matter what they think it stands for, and even no matter whether or not we think that it was effective, it serves to create discussion around the subject of class tensions, and at the very least, it's effective in that.
I also appreciate that, like, I saw this with my parents, and, like, my mom isn't, like, the most attentive film watcher. She's not, like, a huge fan about movies. She kind of likes simple movies, but even she was, like, you know, like, she didn't catch any of the political messages or anything, but she was like, no, that was a very well-made movie, and it was entertaining throughout. I also think that's kind of nice that I think movies with a message are always just better than message movies, so...
Yeah,
Oh,
I
for
would
sure,
agree
yeah.
100%. I think that message movies are almost always terrible, because if you're making it a message movie, you're specifically putting the message ahead of the film. And if you emphasize your message over your filmmaking, your message is worthless. Because
Yeah.
if the message comes from a source that doesn't appear to be polished and well put together, everyone's going to think your message, whether they agree with your message or not, they're going to think your delivery of it is worthless because you didn't take the time to master your own medium. Whereas a movie with a message, whether it's blatant or not, if it's a very good film, that automatically gives the message more value. So I think that's something to keep in mind with movies like Parasite too. Whether the message is blatant or not, the fact that the movie's good almost innately makes us think the message is worth discussing, whereas, like, for a movie like Green Book, which is not as good, it's really not really as much worth the time.
I struggle because a lot of it too is that I think it gets more deserved than or more praise than it deserves. Yeah.
Well, for sure. Think about it like that. Like it's a film that everybody can infer their political bias onto. That is actually well made. Of course, everybody's gonna think it's the next Mona Lisa.
Right, but I guess the other thing too is that I don't think it deserved Best Picture. Well, I mean, released in any other year, I would have said, oh yeah, sure. Like, released last year, I would have been like, oh, hell yeah, that movie deserved Best Picture. But there were, I think, a few movies that were better than it this year. Like, for instance,
Okay.
The Lighthouse.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say bring up one except for The Lighthouse, but it wasn't nominated in the first place because it's such an indie film. Like, name any other one.
But 1917. I think 1917 was a far better film.
I don't.
No.
Like, I wouldn't have been mad if it won, but like yeah.
Yeah,
It worked better for
been
me.
upset with it winning. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't have been overly upset with a lot of the films winning in 2019 because, like, it was just a year where we just had a lot of really good movies. So again, like, we've already had that podcast.
Yes.
So, like, we got really lucky in 2019. Like, we really lucked out as moviegoers.
I
it
feel
feels like the world, when it's at its worst, tends to put out its best art.
Well, of course.
Especially
Yeah.
Wait,
I
what's
feel
with
like that kind of
2020
happened.
then?
Yeah,
Sonic the
I mean,
Hedgehog.
2016 had like the same thing. 2016 was like the season finale of America, and then it's like La La Land, Manchester by the Sea, Moonlight. Thanks.
I personally can't wait. Actually, I'll be interested to see because I think that movies are more like the Spotify Discover Weekly, where it's you have a good year and it's like, oh, I had a good year. I'm just going to listen to these on repeat, and then it goes, all right. Now that I gave you good song suggestions last week, this week it's going to be utter trash. it's never 2 weeks in a row.
That's what
That's kind of like
2018 was.
2015, where 2015 was just like month after month of like crash, garbage, dumpster fire, and then like Mad Max Fury Road and Inside Out, and then the rest of the year was just awful.
Yeah, well, it's almost like they're like, well, we can't give him too many good song suggestions because then he might just go and buy the music. It's like we have to keep him guessing whether it's going to be utter shit that we suggest to him, or if it's going to be great. So like, I listen to one Joy Division song and suddenly I get a bunch of people covering Joy Division. I'm like, this is the worst shit I've ever heard. People who can't play instruments trying to cover a song written by people who can't play instruments. It's like, oh.
Sounds like Cats.
Yeah,
I
precisely.
feel
great.
that, dude. I feel that.
But I'm worried that movies are going to go the same way. That it's going to be, well, we had a good year this year, which means that next year is going to be just utter garbage because we've used all of our good ideas.
Well, until Netflix rules cinema as a like Netflix and Disney, I guess.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a funny way to say the name Disney.
Yeah.
Yeah, rule the industry as a whole.
All
Then
hail the Disney
we
overlords.
will actually have competition driving this whole thing forward. But then we'll see.
I saw this
Also,
one
I
joke
think
where
it's
it's
fair to
like in
point-
10 years.
Sorry.
We were like,
ahead.
it's a quick joke. In 10 years, it's gonna be like, hey, we could watch like a release at home or go to theaters and watch a Disney. That's what it's gonna
That's
be.
probably not too far off from the truth.
No, that's actually pretty true. Especially because that Paramount deal just got overturned, which is fucking awful. Because now
Paramount
major
deal?
studios are going to start buying their own movie theaters again, and then indie films are going to get fucked, and our A24 is dead, which is going to be
What?
awful.
I guess I don't know this news. What's the Paramount deal?
So the Paramount, okay, quick film
Because of
history, sorry,
Trolls
everyone.
2.
So the Paramount deal back in the 20s and 30s, up through the 40s, the major movie studios own their own theaters. So like Paramount owned theaters, Warner Brothers owned theaters, Paramount, or et cetera, and so forth. And the Supreme Court decided, I think in 1948, that was an oligopoly and they couldn't do it anymore. And so after that, theaters became independently owned, and like Warner Brothers and like Disney and Paramount didn't have guaranteed sales, and that created a lot of competition in the industry. And so studios have not been allowed to own theaters since, and I think it was last year the Supreme Court overturned that. So now major movie studios can start buying theaters back from independently owned people now.
I think they might not do that actually, because I think that the online market is proving to be just bloody invaluable right now. I think that they're all going, oh my god, we're all gonna do streaming services now. That's just
that's
the
a
way
good point.
movies
Why
are
buy
now.
theaters when streaming is like?
Well, I mean,
proven
you
to
do
be
make more.
profit.
Typically for like the big blockbusters, it's like at a certain point, but like Avengers Endgame would not have made as much money streaming as it would have in theaters when you can charge $20
theaters can
a
be
ticket or
reduced to
something.
like just like your Marvel movies and your DC movies and your Star Wars movies and your Hellboys, God forbid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, and I mean like
They can just pump out some shit and then tell us, go online, watch it.
yeah.
They're
Going back to
going
like
to.
Avengers Endgame, like how many of you would have felt satisfied sitting through 21 Marvel movies and then watching the final film at home on your laptop and not in a theater with an audience? Like that, like I feel like as long as there's blockbuster franchises, movie theaters probably won't go away because that audience experience is just indispensable.
As much as a theater audience can improve a film experience, I also think that it can bloody ruin a film.
Well, yeah, no shit.
No, absolutely. I mean, you flip
Yeah.
a coin every time you go into a theater.
I definitely ruined
yeah.
the experience of some people watching Cats in Russia, but oh boy, do I not regret it.
Ines and I ruined
honestly,
everyone's
no.
experience with cats.
Oh,
Ines
we
ruined my
ruined-
experience with cats by making me go.
The people
Honestly,
who
I
made
think we
Cats
ruined the
ruined my
experience of everyone
with
in the
Cats.
theater.
No, dude, that guy behind us laughed his ass off when I stood up and left immediately as the credits rolled.
I do like that in a bad movie, everybody in the theater becomes a comic.
Yeah,
And
that's
so
nice.
we're all just sitting there trying to figure out how to make everyone laugh. In
I
the
mean,
you
that's
theater.
wanna
just
talk
that's
about
just
a
going to the
theater?
room in the theater.
Oh,
That's what?
Going to the
The
room.
room. Oh,
Oh.
man.
Yeah,
Going to the
Well,
room
theaters,
with, like the
like, reopened.
1,600 people at the Michigan Auditorium, insane. So
That is
fun.
hands down the best theater experience I've ever had, and probably ever will have. It's so great.
Like, I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna say it's the best. It could be. I don't know, but it's up there. Like, that is phenomenal. Yeah, I hope they reopen theaters for next year, primarily, like, because of this. Because I want
Yeah.
to see The Room in December.
Also, talk
Also, like-
about a great theater and like audience experience. Seeing Parasite opening weekend with like a full theater was awesome.
It was really
Like,
good.
everyone
yeah.
was so reactive and so blown away. It was just a great time. Like people were curled up in their seats, people were laughing, people were clenched. It was awesome. It was
what
so
did
much
you say,
fun seeing
clench?
Parasite with a crowd. What?
People were clenched, you said?
Yeah, like clenching their fists or whatever
Ah.
definition you'd like to think of.
Oh,
I think the theater where Einish and I were was actually relatively quiet.
It was. They laughed throughout. People cheered at like a few points, but it was like the third act. Everyone was silent because it's just so tense.
Well,
and
yeah,
no
that's
one
how
wants
it
to say
should be,
anything.
I think, for that
Yeah.
film.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it wasn't even so much that people weren't like very reactive during the third act, but like you could feel the tension in the room. Like you could feel everyone was kind of like tensed up. And
Yeah,
that like
it was-
additional tension, because like people can feel the emotions of people around them a lot of times. And so being in a theater with an audience who's feeling a similar emotion as you just like heightens it. That's why everyone loves going to horror movies with a sold out theater too. That's why like
Well-
Us was such a good experience.
I might disagree with that point because I do you guys remember the movie Hereditary?
Yeah.
I
Good
mean,
Yeah,
movie. Very good movie.
yeah, I love the movie, except in my audience there was this group of assholes sitting behind me who thought that they were going to see a thriller, and
Oh yeah, that was me.
that
Well, I
yeah,
mean,
oh god, it was the most painful experience.
do elaborate on what you mean by they
There-
expected to see a thriller.
They were doing that classic like horror movie thing, like, oh shit, don't go in there, and
Aw.
Oh geez,
everybody's
yeah, it's not Hereditary.
exactly, and so
Yeah.
so like when the spoilers for Hereditary, but when the girl like sticks her head out the car and gets it like locked
The
off
real
by the stop
ones get
sign.
it.
Yeah. Oh god, that scene was so great, and everybody was like sitting there in shocked silence, and they go, "Oh shit!" I'm like, ah.
I will say, for clarification, when I meant a horror audience, I meant a good horror audience, not assholes.
Yeah.
I'm definitely the person. I have actually said in the theater before, like sitting behind someone, I've like leaned forward and said, "I didn't pay $8 to listen to you talk. Shut up." Like I am not shy about doing that. I did not pay money to have you ruin my $8. Like fuck you. I'm sorry.
All right, that seems like a good place to end it. So, final thoughts? Yeah, final thoughts on Parasite?
Yeah, overall, I think, we made our points. I don't think we really convinced each other, but maybe we convinced the viewers. And I got... There's some stuff I didn't actually, realize when I saw the movie, I think thrice now. But, I think we brought up some points that actually I'm going to think on some more, so...
Yeah, I was gonna say I learned a lot this podcast. Like I really did. This was really cool. I definitely have a lot greater perspective, not just on Parasite, but just on the idea of art and message delivery than I have learned even in art classes. So
I'm gonna go ahead and say this was one of the best podcasts we've ever
236.
had.
Oh, absolutely. No question.
Yeah. I think definitely I'll agree now that it's deeper than I was giving it credit for. I still think it's confused on what it's saying and how it's trying to say it.
A good way to politely dismiss the message. Yeah, just kidding.
But, no, I'll agree that it is certainly deeper. Like there was a point where I was about to be swayed to okay, actually this is very deep and great, and then I kind of came back to my senses.
Then good old Alex took it back over.
I came back to my
wheel.
senses. Wait, no, this is a popular movie. I have to hate it. No, but
Fuck La La Land.
I think
garbage.
The Beatles, terrible.
Worst band of all time.
I do hate the Beatles.
Yeah, no, that's why I was poking at it.
Oh, geez.
Okay, let's discuss.
I like a lot of
okay.
the White Album and hate the rest.
Yeah, and he only liked it because of the word white in the name.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah, all the other albums had significantly too many other colors on the cover.
I was going to say it's because it's back in the USSR, and I'm a huge Russia cuck, so you hear that, Oleg?
That song slaps.
Hear that, audience?
So
As a Russian,
Yeah,
I will say he definitely is a Russia cock, alright.
All right.
Thank you for listening to this podcast.
Boys.
Make sure to like it. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to leave comments. You're allowed
Make
to
sure
do
to
that.
share it with your friends. And we are
Share
also
it with
now
your
on
friends.
Spotify.
Even if you don't have friends, actually, yeah, Spotify is more important.
We're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts now.
Yeah.
Just look up Beyond the Silver Screen.
Definitely over quarantine, you should keep busy consuming our content. Consume,
Reproduce.
recycle.
Those are the 3 essentials for life, baby.
Consume, reproduce, recycle. That should be the new logo instead of the.
That's actually the Bernie Sanders motto.
We should make a shirt Beyond the Silver Screen, and then just those 3 words on the back.
I would actually kill for a shirt that says.
I cannot
Consume.
believe that was. Oh my god, what a Bernie Sanders reference that was. Jesus. Oh my god.
I guess
That's
I
the best
missed
thing
it.
I'm going to hear all day, hands down.
Alrighty.
All right. Good podcast.